Well, I would introduce myself as my name is Rebecca Hurd. I am a Garigal Walkaloa woman, sometimes known as Garigal area. So Garigal is through that northern end of Sydney, through my male apical ancestor, and Walkaloa is through the southern end rather, of Lake Macquarie, and that is my female apical ancestor. Well, I suppose I tried quite a few times to start studying, and between life events and children, etc., it just I just kept hitting walls. So eventually I came across this incredible course, the Graduate Diploma in Indigenous Health Promotion, that is delivered through the University of Sydney. At the time, Michelle Dixon was coordinating the course, and that was designed for mob. So it meant that you could go down to Sydney for a week block, and then you would, have amount of time where you could do your assignments and do your work, and then another block. So the flexibility in that and the way it was designed for mob, and it made a huge difference. And I was able to complete that, which gave me a graduate diploma. And doing that, I just found I loved it so much that I applied for a master's in public health through University of Sydney. And that kind of set me on that pathway. That happened over COVID, which was although with COVID, we don't want to talk about that right now, but especially down in Victoria. But it gave me this great opportunity to study over those years. And yeah, I completed that. It was my greatest achievement to actually pass epidemiology and biostatistics, because I'd had high school maths. But again, amazing experience. And yeah, from then I had done a bit of research, a few research roles, and decided I wanted to do my PhD, and that's led me to this role right now. My PhD topic is around the social and emotional wellbeing needs of children and young people from 10 to 18 who experience detention and who are justice involved in Southern Queensland. And I'll be using, or am using, Indigenous research methods and methodology. So my PhD is through the STEM school. I have a number of supervisors. Our lead supervisor is Nikos Tomakas, and he's the lead of psychology. Kathy Edwards is a youth studies academic, well renowned, and I am very fortunate to have two amazing Indigenous scholars, Liz Ricks and Kim O'Donnell. So I have an amazing team. Yeah, yeah. So our First Nations young people are incredibly over-incarcerated. They are in youth detention centres across the country from age 10 to 17. In Queensland specifically, we lock up over 300 young people a night, and that's set to rise. That there is a new detention centre, two new detention centres opening, one in Cairns and one in the Sunshine Coast, and a new remand centre in Brisbane. So that 300, by the way, is Australian Institute of Health and Welfare data from 2023. So that already would have risen. It also only includes young people up to 17. So if you add 18-year-olds and you add children who are in remand, that would go up even higher. And of these young people, 70% in Queensland are First Nations young people. In the Northern Territory, that's the highest percentage of First Nations young people are in lockup, almost 100%. Victoria we lock up the least number, but they are still a very high percentage of First Nations. And then, of course, the pathway, because youth detention actually doesn't work in terms of either reducing crime or rehabilitating, it sets these young ones on that pathway where it's normalised, and usually onto the pathway into adult detention. Yeah, it's horrific. We lock up children in this country. Yeah. It does differ in that there are more young people incarcerated. It also differs in that the legislation has now changed so that, well, the recent government won that on the premise of, or not the, on the slogan of adult crime, adult time. So you'll have, for instance, crimes that would have once been 7 years maximum are now 14 years. And these are things like dealing with drugs and substances, stealing cars, things that are really common to do for actually any teenager in the country. And so, you know, really interestingly, one of the young people said to me the other day that Queensland is now locking up kids for longer than some of them have been alive. So, you know, for instance, you have a 12-year-old who is, you know, has an incarceration potentially of 14 years. Yeah. That means also they're going from that youth detention space into the adult detention space, potentially having absolute minimal time in the community. So that becomes their norm, or that becomes their life. So what I'm hoping is that in looking at the social and emotional well-being needs of the young people, First Nations people who are in youth detention and who are justice involved, that they get the chance to have their voice. So the research is designed from them. They are the co-researchers. And so to give the best opportunity for them to really express their needs and what's important to them, their feelings about their situation and their social and emotional well-being looks at that very holistic expanse of community, culture, family, connection to country, spirituality. So that kind of giving them the chance to express those aspects of their lives and whatever else may come up too. So I suppose the hope is that that will inform policy change. I know that the youth detention centres in themselves, because although we have this horrific system, there are some amazing people working in the system who are very keen to do the best for the young people. So even if that research and the voices of the young people can have an impact on on the ground, you know, within the system, policy, whatever level, will make a difference. Yeah. Well, actually, the research questions, I do have research questions and, of course, the aims. But because the goal is that the research is very representative of the young people, that the questions also are kind of generated from them. So there's a very iterative focus where, as I engage more with the young people, that also influences the methodology and the methods and also the questions. So there's space for things evolving, and the aim really is just to give them the utmost chance to express themselves. The main research method within the research engagement that I'm using is, I suppose I call it cultural art yarning circles. So the cultural art isn't, I just be clear, it's not the kind of cultural art that you would see handed down from generation to generation in that very kind of spiritual and knowledge holder way, but it is art that has a cultural lens to it and is also influenced by the Aboriginality and of the young people and myself. And the yarning circles is the same. It's being able to sit together and yarn. How this came about was I'd done a research role with the University of Queensland where I'd interviewed 110 young people within the youth justice setting, within the detention centres. And I had a set of semi-structured interview questions to ask. And what I found was that the young people, they would just start drawing. And then we'd start drawing together. And then the conversations that came from that very, just being able to focus on drawing and then continue to yarn together were a lot deeper than the confrontive one-on-one. And I found also that going through, because I go into the youth detention centres and do art with the young people and also in the community, and I found that the things that are talked about while we're doing art are just, I don't know, it takes the focus away and gives this opportunity to more freely talk and also to have silence. And so I thought, and it was also a very comfortable space for the young people and me to be in together. So I thought that that would be a really good method to, as a research method. And of course it's evidence-based, etc. as well, yeah. So that is a much more holistic concept of health and well-being, including your, connection to country, spirituality, connection to community, connection to family, connection to culture. And so it's a much more holistic approach to health. And it doesn't just work for First Nations people, it applies for everybody. Yeah. So that is, particularly as I'm doing my PhD through STEM, and because it works anyway, it's across the board, that's a good lens to look at the way to, I suppose, frame the research. Yeah. When I started going into the youth detention centres, one of the lead caseworkers said to me, it doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you're from, what age you are, what gender, the young ones will work you out in a few seconds as to whether you you're to be trusted or you're somebody they can see is someone they will relate to and trust, because they work off instincts. They've had to survive, so they'll sort you out in a few seconds, really. And you notice walking on section and all eyes go. So I suppose, and look, I to be honest too, I just love these kids. So I'm sure they sense that I care about them and I enjoy their company. I think they're some of the most extraordinary people I've ever met. And so I think, and it's kind of funny advice to give, but you've just got to be who you are and then to keep turning up. That's another thing. I had this amazing experience with one of the young women in Brisbane Youth Detention Centre, and I thought she just hated me. I'd go in there and I would get the death stares, and then she'd walk past, and then she'd always steal something. And I just thought, okay, that's all right, that's how it is. And I just kept going back and going back. And then one day she's just sat down next to me, and that was it. We had, she decided she was going to trust me, and we had an amazing rapport. And even it came out while we were doing art together, because sometimes I need to shut up, but I'll go, oh my God, that's amazing. Oh my God, that's beautiful. And she said, why are you always saying that? I said, well, I say it because I mean it. I said, don't you believe me, or does it sound fake or something? She said, oh, no, we've all got trust issues. So it was quite an insightful moment. But I suppose that's another one of the that I've learnt. Just keep showing up. Just keep showing up. Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, the young people are the experts on their lives. So they're the ones who are really speaking and providing the knowledge. And so the concept of co-researching is that we work together, that we work and we shape that research design. When I'm writing up research or the stories, it's going back to them and they're commenting and changing and, making sure that that is their voice. And also in designing, like I'll write academic documents, but also documents that are going to be accessible and that, have the input and collaboration of the young people. Yeah. it's kind of really early stages in terms of actual findings, but from my observations, and this was again kind of a surprise when I first was going into the detention centres with Queensland Uni, and a lot of the rhetoric was, these kids don't talk, these kids don't talk, you don't get anything from them. And so one of the really big findings to start with is these kids do talk and they want their voices heard. They just want you to listen. Yeah. And then also act on what they say. So it's one thing to listen, but if there's not a follow on, then that's kind of another level of betrayal in a way. Yeah. I hope to show and showcase some of their strengths. I hope that their voices are represented. As part of the research design, there'll be an art exhibition and a book. And so hoping that that's something that can be distributed. And I hope I can take the outcomes of the research to policymakers and hound them, hound them for change and advocate for the young people, but also that they get the opportunity to speak. I was really fortunate to be part of, to present at the Youth Justice Conference in Brisbane this year, and the co-presenter I was with, Kate Berger, she was able to facilitate that a number of young people would present with us. And so we stepped back and allowed them to tell their story. So that's something I would like to be able to do through this research. Yeah. The current justice system doesn't exist anymore. Oh, it's funny, somebody was saying, I was talking to the other day, and they're saying the system is broken. It's actually, no, the system is actually working exactly as it's designed to work. So to have a complete alternative, a healing-based alternative, early intervention and support from the ground up, from families through to communities. As soon as there is any concerns with the young people, that they get wraparound supports. And this works. They're doing it in Scotland and in England. They talk about now locking up kids we are scared of, not who we're angry with. So it's really looking at a completely different approach where the support and the funding goes to that wraparound support, and then it works. It works. It's very well documented that locking up children and people doesn't work. It doesn't reduce crime. It doesn't rehabilitate. It actually sets people on a pathway of incarceration. Mm. Yeah. Well, I suppose we'll see what happens with the outcomes, but the plan is that, and the young people are all over this. They love this idea. I was really surprised because so much of digital world that we live in said, well, you know, what do you think of a book? Yep. What do you want to talk about? I want to tell you my life story. So when you're kind of given that too, it feels like a real responsibility to pursue, to make that happen. I don't know what the outcomes will be. I hope that we can have, well, you know, the plan is to have an exhibition in the community in Southern Queensland and invite family, friends, stakeholders, everybody, and to showcase the young people's art, and also to, you know, launch the book of their stories. And then we'll see how that goes. It would be amazing to have one down in Melbourne too, but I have to find some funding for that. Yeah. The whole HDR experience is a new experience. So a higher degree of research, so PhD research is, it's interesting as a First Nations scholar that we're still really having to work through. I know the word decolonizing gets thrown around a lot, but still really having to work through ways to decolonize the academy. So it's really well known that you need to spend time. There's almost this kind of rub, I suppose, where on one hand you have, say, your AATSIS guidelines for doing research with mob, and on the other hand you have the Western Academy where the expectation is a lot more time and not as much time expected to really spend time with the community, making sure you're representing them, making sure that you're building relationships and showing respect. And so there is quite a incongruity with the two, and I think there's a lot of work to be done in that space. I think we're getting there, but it's a very common theme for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander researchers to find that space very challenging. Yeah. That's very honest, but it's very true. You know, it doesn't mean that it's not, there's not amazing things going on, but it is a challenge. Yeah. Ethics is an absolute minefield, particularly within this space, because the young people ticked all the boxes of vulnerable. So you have to do a lot of work to have the ethics approved. But also at the same time, I understand that is protecting. There's a protective factor in there as well. Dealing with bureaucracy within the academy is difficult because, again, there's not a real understanding of what you need to do authentic, even that word's thrown around a bit, but to do research with integrity with mob. And yeah, so they are challenges. And I think they're across the board. I have, colleagues who are doing their PhDs, and these are very common themes. And also there's not a lot of mob who are higher degree researchers and academics. And so, I'm so grateful to have the Liz and Kim on my team, because until you've really done research with mob and got your hands dirty and know that world, it's really hard to understand what that is like. Indigenous research methods and methodology, and while they are, globally evidenced and used, there's still some fear. There's still ideas, I think, that they are lesser than your Western methodologies, or even that you have to match them with Western methodologies. So it is changing, but it feels like you've got to do twice as much work to do research that is going to be representative of mob. Yeah.